This video will give you a quick recap or quick introduction to functional groups. We can have alkanes, alkenes, and alkynes. Alkanes are when we have all CC single bonds. And so each of those carbons would be bonded to 3 other atoms as well. In an alkene, we'll have a CC double bond, and each of those carbons will be bonded to 2 other atoms. And in an alkyne, we'd have a C-C triple bond, where each of those carbons is bonded to 1 other atom. And so alkanes are technically the single bonded part of the molecule. That's technically the part that is not functional. Functional groups really are things that have double or triple bonds, or other groups that add function to that molecule. So I like to remember them ene, ene, yne in alphabetical order, A, E, Y for single, double, and triple bonds. So here at alkenes and alkynes are where we really start having our actual functional groups. We can have a hydroxyl, and molecules that contain the hydroxyl or the OH functional group are called alcohols. And we could have an alcohol that had our R or alkyl group like CH3 and then an O and an H. So having that OH or that hydroxyl, it really sounds like hydrogen and oxygen connected to something else, is an alcohol. We could have an ether functional group. In an ether functional group, we could have ROR, so we have carbon chains on either side of an oxygen. The R groups could be matching or they could be different. So, for example, you could have a C with 3 H's, and then an O, and then maybe you have a CH2 and a CH3. So that would be an example of an ether. Diethyl ether was often used to put people under before other anesthesia was developed. Benzene is a 6-membered hexagon ring, 6-membered carbon ring shaped like a hexagon, and it's got double, single bonds. Now, they're not quite double, single, so lots of times people draw that hexagon with a circle in the middle. And benzene itself happens to be aromatic. Now, the term aromatic is kind of complicated, applies to other molecules that meet certain rules, but suffice it to say that benzene does happen to be aromatic. Now, there are a number of functional groups that contain the carbonyl, and the carbonyl group is the C double bond O group. Now, carbonyl is fairly general and not very helpful. So we oftentimes want to know what carbonyl group do we have. Do we have an aldehyde? Now, I like to write an aldehyde with a capital hydrogen in there. Just to remind me that an aldehyde is where there's a C double bond O that terminates with a hydrogen on that side of the molecule. The other side of the molecule could have an R group. For example, it might be a CH3 with a C double bond O and then an H or an aldehyde. You could have a ketone. In a ketone, you could have an R group and then a C double bond O, and then you could have a matching R or a different R. And I like to think of that as a key between those carbon chains, even though ketone is not spelled with a Y. And then you could have a carboxylic acid. And in a carboxylic acid, you'll have a C double bonded to O connected to an R group, and then on the other side, an O and an H, and it's that OH hydrogen that is actually that acidic hydrogen. So that hydrogen can be lost and can actually be acidic. So we have our aldehyde, ketone, our carboxylic acid, and one last functional group with a carboxylic, or with a carbonyl rather, is an ester functional group. So let's try the ester. So as the last one that has a carbonyl, we have the ester, and it's got C double bond O, and it's got an O, and it can have the same R groups or different R groups on either side of the ester. And then we want to know about amine functional groups, and amine groups have a nitrogen, and it can be bonded to hydrogens or carbon, and bonded to two hydrogens and one carbon makes it primary. It can be bonded to a hydrogen and two carbons, and we can call it secondary, or it can be bonded, oops, I wanted to bond it instead to all carbons. So I'll just do that here. And if it's bonded to all carbons, it's called tertiary, or a third degree amine. So that's just a quick overview or recap of some key important functional groups.